The seven mountain mandate. Is this right? Is it sound doctrine? Is it the truth? Or is it something that's really wrong? Good questions. I'd like to explain what I found out. It's got to do with what the Bible says and how sometimes people can come up with things that sound good and they kind of like, well, the word shoehorn it into the Bible when the Bible really doesn't teach it. Is that what's going on with the seven mountain mandate? Back in the 70s, Francis Schaeffer started talking about this, and now there's modern, in the past few years, different Bible people that are preaching this or trying to promote this. It was an idea that divides culture, society, or what you live in a country in 7 ways. Somebody can put the 7 ways down in comments there. Different things like religion, politics, the school system, the family. Just you can divide it up any way you want. What it really means is they're just itemizing different aspects of a way to run society that's based on what they feel is Christian morality and Christianity kind of in a nice way taking over and controlling everything. It's really an offshoot or an addition or a different way of explaining dominion theology or kingdom restoration. Now, okay, what does this mean? See, there's 2 different models in the Bible itself, which is interesting. You got like, here, let's take a look. Okay, somewhere, there's Matthew, and here's the Bible. See it? This much is Old Testament, this much is New Testament. There's 2 different programs, 2 different teachings, 2 different models. And they talk about the 7 mountain mandate as different spears. I've heard that word, whatever it means. But in the Old Testament, what happened was, as God wanted people, after the fall of Adam, he wanted to try to restore them. He wanted them to do right, okay? And people didn't. They were under the temptation of darkness, the fallen angels, the ones that actually messed everything up in the garden, Satan and fallen angels, tempting people. But God wanted them to turn away from that darkness and follow him in spirit and truth. In the Old Testament, you can actually find this. And, they didn't do it. And he ended up with the Tower of Babel, making all the different languages, trying to get people to separate themselves so one group would hopefully love him, follow him, and turn from the darkness into the light, so to speak. And then God would honor them, bless them. Okay, now think about it. Bless them, give them provisions, take care of them in all kinds of ways. But the problem was the enemy had so much power on earth that when people would start doing the right thing, he'd come in, tempt them, and they'd get off track. So God tried to keep them back on track. Tower of Babel, different languages, separated people. They started having wars among each other. The next thing you know, it was one tribe against the other. And God made a covenant with Abraham and made the nation of Israel, which they thought would fix it because now we have God's nation as opposed to the other tribes, which they all kind of copied it and developed their own nations. So you've got opposing nations, and they would go to war with each other. And God was trying to protect Israel. He had them in war. So they're all fighting. Israel still would not faithfully turn from the darkness. The power of temptation was too great. And so God would take his miracles away. I mean, the miracles of Samson, David and Goliath, Daniel the lion's den, the parting of the Red Seas, all of these miracles. God would have brought them right into this whole realm and protected them if they would have been faithful. But they weren't. A few were. And God counted their faith as righteousness. And it was a good thing. And Noah was really on the right track. He was found perfect in his generations. After the flood, he got tempted and got into trouble again. David was the same way. He had faith in God. God gave him the ability to defeat Goliath. And then David turns around and gets in trouble again because temptation is too great. There's the problem. Now, in the Old Testament, this has got to do with the 7 mountains and dominion theology. God said, well, I want my people to have dominion, and in the way that Israel would be a nation that is founded in the principles of God and following God in spirit and truth and taking on the evil nations and actually defeating them in war. They had a lot of wars where Israel would win. And then at times when Israel was not faithful to God, he'd pull his protection back and they would be defeated. So here's the point. The whole Old Testament was like dominion theology. God was trying to get Israel to do that, establish the kingdom of Israel. And they had King David. Okay, he was a king over a kingdom. The problem was the people kept all the time rebelling against God and the power of temptation and darkness controlling them. They ended up in the wilderness, the parting of the Red Seas. God got them away from Egypt. And in the wilderness, they refused to go in the promised land because of lack of faith. They didn't believe God could save them from what they saw as giants in the promised land. When God miraculously got them through the Red Sea, they just didn't have faith. And they were rebelling and getting into false gods, which had false sacrificial systems. You got really sick, and you had sick things like Sodom and Gomorrah going on with some of the other nations, and then rebellion against God by the children of Israel. So God comes up with another plan of putting the law on them. The Mosaic law, the 10 Commandments on the mountain given to Moses. Now he put Israel under the law, and then lots of laws were added to it. Oh man, there's bunches of them. There's so many of them, nobody can figure out how many laws there were. But the idea was, if you break the law, you'll be punished. So that'll get you to stop sinning. And instead of choosing to do wrong under the temptation, you look at the law and the penalty of it, and you go, no, I ain't going to do that. All of this whole Old Testament system was trying to get the kingdom of God established on earth through Israel. God knew. He knows everything, past, present, and future. He knew it wasn't going to work. So he promised Israel a Messiah that would fix the mess. Well, along comes Jesus. John the Baptist, the great prophet, said, here he is. His shoes I'm not worthy to latch. And he'll save you from your sins. Well, Israel rejected Jesus. Well, that was part of God's plan too, because he wanted the Gentiles to be able to come in. He wanted Jesus to die for everybody on earth. Here's where the problem is with the 7 mountain mandate and dominion theology. When Jesus come on the scene, and on the cross, he defeated death. He took the keys of hell away from Satan for the future to be able to control people enough to put them in there. He broke the power of Satan on the cross by his blood. Now, Satan is still here. He didn't cast him into outer darkness yet. He's using this to develop the church into the end times church, into the small remnant, as the days of Noah, that are going to escape a 7-year period of judgment on the Christian church for being unfaithful, living in sin, and doing unfruitful works of darkness. He's going to allow them to be punished and to be judged, and then hopefully a small amount will come out of them overcoming. The first bunch of overcomers are kept from the hour of tribulation, which encompasses all of the different judgments. And on that day and hour, nobody knows when it's going to start, but it'll start, and you'll have 7 years of it for the 7 churches. Well, what about the 7 mountains? Now, they're pulling that out of the Old Testament. The problem is this. I want to explain in some of the next videos how I personally dealt with 2 different ministries. One that was dominion restoration, dominion theology, and the other that followed a biblical different way of looking at the New Testament. I want to explain the 2 differences. And it becomes really evident and very, very clear in a very simple and easy to understand way why dominion theology is wrong. And I want to explain how I was involved in two really big movements and ministries. I'm going to go into it and show you how I was trying to figure out which was right and wrong at that time. And the answer to the problem is the very question we're dealing with now with this new 7 mountain mandate, which is just a different version of dominion restoration theology. And we're going to look at the Bible. All of the principles of dominion theology are really well spelled out in the Old Testament. But something odd happens in the New Testament that changes the rules. Well, what? There's nothing that changes the... Yeah, there is. Besides being freed from sin by the blood on the cross, you're washed, cleansed, and you're free from sin, Paul says. Now you have your fruit unto holiness. The false church doesn't like that. Okay? They don't like that. They want to keep sinning and have liberty and an excuse. They don't want to go there. But that's a whole other thing that I've spoken about. But in the New Testament, Jesus says, I'm going to do something special. I'm going to send you the Comforter. Oh boy, now you get power. You get a teacher. You're led and guided into all truth. The Comforter will provide the spiritual power for you to overcome temptation, overcome the enemy. And then what do you call it? An overcomer. That's in the New Testament. It's altogether different. Jesus' words, then the teachings of Paul, and the teachings of all the different disciples, Peter and all of them. There's a whole different message than in the Old Testament, when it was government, laws, kingdoms on earth, and God dealing with that, trying to have Israel be that. Well, it didn't work. They never quit sinning. They never got away from the power. They always failed. So the Messiah come for Israel to be the answer. And what did they do? They rejected it. In the next video, I'm going to talk to you about the 2 different models of churches and what I've seen in the Bible that cleared this problem up and made it very easy to understand. Dominion theology is wrong for Christians. It's okay in the Old Testament. And how they apply it to the New Testament, why? Why do they even want to bring this in? There's an ulterior motive. I wouldn't be surprised if you could guess what it is. But anyhow, I'm going to stop this video. This is video number 1 on the 7 mountain mandate, which is just another version of dominion restoration theology, kingdom now theology, some people call it. But anyhow, let me start the next video and go on.